Good morning, everyone. Honorable dignitaries on the dais, Professor Sudipta Mundal, Father Raji Pukurian, Professor K.J. Joseph, Dr. P.C. Aniyan Kunya, family members of Professor K.J. George Joseph, the staff and students and alumni of the Department of Economics, St. Berkman's College, are proud to celebrate the memory of her legendary teachers who were the torch bearers of economics studies in Kerala. We have gathered here this morning to remember and cherish the memories of one of our such gifted and committed teachers, Professor George Joseph. We intend to remember him through this Union Budget analysis session. The Union Budget was presented on 1st of February 2023. Apparently, the Finance Minister has done a fine balancing job with the budget. Many applaud her for the growth orientation of the budget, highlighting the significant hike in capital expenditure. Nevertheless, there are also vehement criticisms leveled against the orientation of the budget, which substantially cuts down on social welfare spending en route to the path of fiscal consolidation. The critics would point out that this is neither a growth nor a welfare or augmenting budget. Today's budget analysis session aims to deliberate on the growth and welfare implications of the Union Budget 2023-24. We are indeed privileged to have among us one of the most qualified academicians to analyze the Union Budget 23-24 in Professor Sudipta Mundal, who is currently the chairman of the Board of Center for Development Studies, Thiruvananthapuram. His illustrious career includes the engagement with various other renowned institutions, including the Asian Development Bank, the Reserve Bank of India, Ministry of Finance, Government of India, the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi, the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, the Indian School of Public Policy, New Delhi, and the National Council of Applied Economic Research. On a personal note, I could really feel his professionalism and his prompt responses right from the time I began to contact him for this program. Dear sir, with immense joy, I welcome you to this inaugural session of Professor George Joseph Budget Analysis Session today. Welcome, sir. To chair the budget analysis session, we have among us one of the most competent academicians available in Kerala today in Professor K.J. Joseph, Director of Gulati Institute of Finance and Taxation, Thiruvananthapuram. The economics family of St. Berkman's College is extremely proud that he is our distinguished alumnus. We fondly acknowledge the association with you very recently as our Board of Studies member, intervening constructively in our UG and PG syllabus revision in 2015 and 2019. Hearty welcome, dear K.J. Joseph, sir, to this August gathering. I welcome Reverend Father Raji Pukurian, our dear principal, and the president of this gathering, who is an ardent supporter of all the initiatives of the department. Hearty welcome, dear Father. I welcome Dr. P.C. Aniyan Kunya, former Principal, St. Aloysius College, Edatwa, and our dear alumnus, who has readily agreed to share his fond memories of Professor George Joseph with us. Hearty welcome, sir. We are grateful to the family of Professor George Joseph for instituting an endowment fund for this annual academic event. Hearty welcome, dear Animal teacher, Jacob Thomas, sir, Brigadier Retired Prakadan, sir, and all the family members to this gathering. Hearty welcome to our former teachers of the department who built and elevated the department to the present status. We welcome all our dear teachers who are present today, Professor Dr. M.S. James, Professor T.K. Thomas, Dr. M.P. Philip, Professor Joseph Kurian, and all other teachers who are amidst us today. Welcome you all, sir. We welcome the members of the Merchant Association of Changanasheri who are present amidst us. Hearty welcome all of you to this August gathering. We gratefully acknowledge our media partners, Deepika and Business Deepika, and welcome their representatives to this gathering today. Finally, I welcome all the other participants of the lecture, teachers and students of the department, teachers and students of other institutions around the college and from other departments of the college, and our dear alumni of the college. You're all actually the real beneficiaries of this program. Wish you all a very productive and academically engaging session today. Thank you very much.
Respected Professor Sudeep Thuamundale, the resource person of this day. Respected Professor K.J. Joseph, who is the moderator of these sessions. Respected Dr. Shinu Waki, Head of the Department, Economics. Dr. P.C. Aniyangunj, who is to remember Professor George Joseph here. Respected retired teachers of St. Berkman's College. Respected faculty members from the Department of Economics and from other departments too, I think. And my dear students, good morning all. First of all, I make an apology because I am a little bit late, because there is a function going on in the Cardinal Padiera Hall, which is also, the session is chaired, or the session is led by Professor Dr. Kalidas Sen, a renowned scientist from the Central University of Hyderabad. So I had to be there, and so that's why I am a little bit late. So I make an apology here first. So this is a great day for St. Berkman's College, especially many academic events are going on this day itself, and one of the major one is, or one of the most important one is this one, Professor George Joseph Memorial Union Budget Analysis. I fondly remember Professor George Joseph, and he was such a nice person, that means always pleasant. I remember his face in that way mainly. And the other thing is that he was so humble, and I think he was ready to help at any time, that means to do the maximum he can to the college while he was teaching in the campus, and even after his retirement. Sometimes he was here present in our campus. I came here to this campus only in 2002. By that time he got retired and he was taking rest, but I could meet him many a times in our campus. That's why I cherish his memories in most respected way. And the Union Budget Analysis session in memory of Professor George Joseph is a befitting memory or remembrance which we can make in our campus to remember such an academician who contributed much to the Department of Economics and for the fame of the St. Berkman's College, which is celebrating its centenary. SB is and always was was also remembered by the great academicians, that means teachers we had in the long 100 years. That means a lot of great teachers were here in our campus to make St. Berkman's great and famous. And we have many other programs which are of high class academic importance. And this one is too, is of that kind. As our HOD said, the union budget, which was presented in 1st February, that means the beginning of this month, is so important to the country, which is one of the global powers as it is designed or as it is set. Both in the financial level or economic status, as well as in the what I can say, human power also. That means we are becoming in 2 or 3 months, in between, in 2 or 3 months, we will be the most populous country in the world. Within 2 or 3 months, it is said. So I read in the newspaper yesterday. That's why. So, as a nation with great importance, this type of budget will lead the country as well as the youth. That means our country is having the most number of youths in the world. That means we are to lead the world in the next generation. So as a country with this number of youth, and as a country with this kind of economic transactions, and as a leading global power, our country's budget is so important. But as our HOD said, it does not speak anything about a welfare state. But it speaks about many things, about the industrialization, about the future of India, about the nation which is to lead the world, and many other things. But in core level, we have to think, or we have to expose our nations, or we have to make our nation a welfare concept nation. So this type of academic deliberations will help to think our students about the budgets or its key focus and so on. I wish all of you to have a fruitful day in this academic session, and I wish all of you to gain the maximum out of it. Once again, I remember the fond memories of Professor George Joseph. I remain. Thank you.
Commemoration strengthens the generation links. It involves remembrance and expression of respect. Over the years, St. Berkman's has been in the habit of strengthening these precious links. Today, the Department of Economics adds to this Berkman tradition of commemorating its teachers of years. Congratulations for the effort of commemorating Professor George Joseph, sir. For me, as one of his former students, is a privilege and a blessing to discharge this noble task. Professor George Joseph was called to eternal rest on 30th June 2022. Was a professor with utmost sincerity, I would like to underline that word, and social commitment. He was born in 1939 in the Karthikapalli family, Changanashwari. He joined this prestigious institution in 1963 and served the college for a long 31 years. He led the team of economics faculty as the head of the department during 1991-1994. A smile can add a great deal to one's face value. Professor George Joseph always had a dignified smile on his face. There was also an matching intrinsic value within him. A smile is a light in the window of the face by which the heart signifies it is at home and waiting. George Joseph Sir has always been at home in the college and has been waiting always for the good of the students and the institution. This has been well attested by his round the career approach of making friendship and deep sincere company not only with the teachers and to the extent of respect and the warmth that he has been or he had given to his dear students. I call that precious thing to my mind. As we all know, public finance has been his favorite subject, and the department has rightly chosen budget analysis as the topic for the commemoration lecture. I congratulate Dr. Shinu Varki because this very selection of the topic is a befitting tribute to Professor George Joseph Sir. I also take the freedom to observe that we students and also sometimes teachers, I guess, to use the name of one of the authentic professors in public finance to address him very popularly and positively, always Professor George Joseph. I don't mention that name because that has been the extent of commitment, the involvement that George Joseph has put into that very branch of this discipline of economics. He was a very sincere teacher interested to get involved in the corporate life of the institution. It is well attested by his leadership as the NCC officer, secretary of the Staff Cooperative Society, actor in the prestigious Shakespearean theatre, etc. He was always a man of teamwork and enjoyed the company of friends, relatives, and students. He was very much interested in meeting people and building up friendships. Even after his retirement, he was very much involved in the public life by assuming leading roles in the programs of Changanashwari Weissman Club and Senior Citizens Forum. Anyone who got associated with Professor George Joseph will have many stories to share about his personal care and love. He was truly a family man with due concern and love for his dear ones. His wife was the late Rosama K. George, retired principal of Government Higher Secondary School, Thadathavadagara, and is survived by his three children. Mr. Joseph K. George is in Dubai, Mr. Gigi K. George is in Australia, and Mrs. Anumol George, she herself being a higher secondary school teacher working at Alapura. Thank you very much for the prompt response from the family, especially his children, for this noble and meaningful task. We pay our respect before the happy remembrance of our dear George Joseph Sir and pray for the eternal reward. Thank you one and all. Let us benefit from the lecture. Best wishes. May I remind.
Father Reggie P. Kurian, the president of this session, the chief guest and key speaker of the day, Professor Sujit Tomantel, and he is also my most respected teacher, Professor P.C. Aniyangun, who introduced Professor Joe Joseph, on whose name this particular session is going to be held, Dr. Shinu Woki, head of the department of my great alumni of this college, my beloved teachers who are present here, Dr. James, my friends, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Joyce. Importantly, the family members of late Professor Joe Joseph, who were instrumental in organizing this event, the future alumni of this college. I'm referring to the most important people of the day, I mean the beloved students. Visiting your ancestral home or getting an invitation from your alma mater is one of the most pleasant things in one's life, particularly in your personal and the latter one in the professional life. I'm extremely happy that I'm invited to be here, and I have been given the opportunity to involve with various activities of this institution. The question is, why one will feel happy when your alma mater invites you. One will feel happy if and only if that alma mater is keeping the pace that you have seen when you were here, or it is ahead of the pace. If it is going down, an invitation will be, in fact, a disgrace. As far as this institution is concerned, we know that any academic institution in the prime business of producing knowledge, and we know that knowledge is the most important resource of the modern days. And if knowledge is the key resource, learning is the key process. It's not manufacturing, which when we all got independence, we were told that either you industrialize or perish. But today I feel that today anyone will be asking you, you either learn or perish. And what essentially involves learning? Learning is not, unfortunately, learning is not by hurting of textbooks. Learning is quintessentially a process of interaction. That interaction leads to different kinds of knowledge. It can be a codified scientific knowledge, or it can be a synthetic experience-based knowledge. When it comes to development, both are equally important. And when you're talking about interaction, interaction can be within an institution, within your classroom, within your home, or interaction between different actors in a society. Regardless of the space of interaction that you talk, there are certain written and unwritten rules, laws, norms, practices, tradition that determine the nature and pattern of interaction. You know that in certain classrooms, certain teachers, I have a friend you may be knowing, a classmate, who is Father Kapipadi, you are called Father Putanpura, we were classmates. I don't want to deviate, there's no time for it's not my lecture. He recently made a joke, you know his style of talk. He says that when we were in the 8th standard, I mean Professor Fadan Puttanpura and KJ Joseph. We were all in the same group. When we were in the 8th standard, our prayer very often than not was that teacher, I don't want to use the name of the teacher, may the Almighty please make that teacher to fall down today and break her leg so that she won't come to the class and teach mathematics, because in the mathematics class, if you are asked a question, she has made you sit in your bench in such a way that you will never ever raise from the... And that is the interactive space that was created in that classroom. And that kind of an interactive space gives rise to certain kind of learning. And at your home, what kind of interactive space that you create between your children? In your society, what kind of interactive space that you create between, say, industry and business? Say, between academia? Today I understand that Merchants Association members are being invited, they are all here. What I am trying to say that this institution is known for creating a much wider space, interactive space. I remember when Professor Joanne Robertson used to visit CDS, at the instance of Professor Cesar Scaria, who was one of the founding members of CDS, Professor Joanne Robertson used to visit this institute. And in fact, the tradition that this institution has nurtured is such that there is hardly any leading economist of this country who has not passed through this institution. That essentially means that this institution has been caring for, providing an interactive space for these scholars to learn from different experts, and this is in fact the primary steps towards the creation of an eminent institution. That is precisely why I am happy I am here. This is an occasion, and also this is also a tradition. In fact, if you read Frederick List, the book National System of Political Economy, 1841, one of the strongest critique of Adam Smith's book, he says every generation is rich only to the extent to which you can learn from your previous generation. And that is exactly what is happening here. You are using your founders, you are using the forum of your earlier teachers to create another forum, to get outsiders involved, to invite it, and that is why we are celebrating the memory of Professor George Joseph here. I appreciate the Department of Economics. I appreciate the decision makers here for nurturing and continuing the legacy of this institution. In fact, I am here not only because of that. I am here, this is a great opportunity to pay respect to one of the greatest teachers whom I have ever taught. I met Dr. James in the morning. He was a wonderful teacher for us, a loving teacher, affectionate teacher. He was actually the first batch whom, after passing out from the top, you know that here there's a culture of the topper get appointed. He first batch to teach us was that he was such a friendly teacher. And I'm here again, particularly because I thought when I was told that Professor Mandal is going to speak, I thought I must be here. I was in fact actually telling Professor Dr. Waki that why should I be here, because but then I thought if Professor Mandal is here, I would like to be here. Look, my dear friends, here is a remarkable teacher. When I went to Center for Development Studies for my MPhil, the first module on pricing and investment behavior, wherein he introduced us to Kalevsky, Andrea Note, and Joseph Steindl and others, and the manner in which he has brought down, he has made economics teaching closely linked to reality. There was no parallel. In fact, I was one among, the kind of, in Center for Development Studies those days, we used to smoke in the class, which you can't imagine. Professors would come and take a cigarette or a BD. We had only one girl student. We were 13 in the batch. Only one girl student, Radhika Pilal. She used to be the regular supplier, and now she is a big boss in UNDP. And the first batch he is taught, we have the finance minister of Jammu and Kashmir. And you have the chief general manager of ITC. You have got, today if you read almost half of the EPW editorial is written by one of his students. The director of ISEC Bangalore is his student. So what I am trying to say that the evenings that Professor Sripto used to offer us, not only the class, I used to ask a lot of stupid questions. Never, ever. He would come. That's right. He has a particular style. That's right. He'll come. You won't remember that. I remember it, sir. He would come and he's put his foot on this thing and he will look at my face. And after 3-4 minutes, he will convince me that what I asked is stupid, but he will never say that. He will never say that. I know I should not ask that, but the manner in which he provoked questions, the interactive space of learning that he has created in the classroom has no match. And I will also tell you another, and I can go on and go on and on. I don't want to elaborate on the various capacity which he has, which I will come back later. Another occasion, when I was presenting one of my first papers on electronics industry, you won't again remember, and you were the discussant. You were the discussant of the paper in the 86 seminar in CDS, and you had gone to ADB at that time. And when I became professor, when I went to IIM Ahmedabad to discuss Ashok Desai's paper on that day, our TT Srikumar told me, Joseph, I remember on that day, Sudipta Mandal told that there are two papers. One was the economic advice from Department of Electronics. My paper was comparing electronics industry in India and South Korea. And he said, Joseph's paper is more analytical, so I'll focus on that. He has taken out things which I have never imagined so much so that there is so much discussion. And I got a great well-wisher of mine, Jairam Ramesh. He told me, Arey bhai, तू नारियल के नीच के बैठ कर इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स के बारे में रिसर्च कर रहे हो, दिल्ली आ जाओ. And 86 onwards, I went to Delhi, and Jairam is like my elder brother. Jairam Ramesh is like, now that relationship is maintained because he who opened up through that paper, that's what I'm trying to say, that this is for me when I came here, because I have, this is a great occasion which I don't think that. And again, when I was a PhD scholar, couple of chapters on my market segmentation and the chapters my supervisor was not agreeing. I used to say, I discussed with the Mandal, and Professor Sudipta agreed. And he would, during my PhD days, he was a professor at that time in NIPP, take me for lunch. After lunch, he will give me a pan. A professor will have, the part I'm trying to say that this is a great lesson for the teachers to follow. What kind of space that you create between your students and the teachers. There are remarkable students. They are wonderful in terms of the hostel. They are extremely vocal. But the moment you go to your professor, they start shivering. That shouldn't be the case. These are the typical examples of faculty, the teachers who provided the freedom for the students to come up with even if the blunder ideas, but they never put you down. But they encourage raising questions, because in social science, basic thing is not giving answers, my dear friends. Raise questions. Only through raising questions, inquiry starts. So I think, sir, Professor Mandal, I came bigly because of that. Now the question is coming to our budget talk. You know that budget is not, as economic students and commerce students, you know that budget is something that happens in Delhi and doesn't affect. And even if it is Madam Sitharaman's or if it is Sri Balagopal's, it affects the day-to-day life of our country. And when you are talking about central budget, we are talking about something like 45 lakh crore rupees. And we have a GSDP of 300 lakh crore. That means 15% of your GSDP you are talking about. At that money, when it is going to an economy, you will have, and you are trying to look at what is the impact. Unfortunately, what we see in the world, in the budget discussion, there is no dearth of that in the TV. You get a divided group. Some people say that, oh, you could not have made a remarkable budget, better budget than this. On the other hand, people will say the budget is stupid. There is nothing in it. 45 lakh crore is gone to dogs. What is the situation? But in my case, as far as I'm concerned, I would say that I will put it in a way that how it could be looked at, and to give an answers, we cannot get a better person than Professor Sudipta, my respected teacher. For me, budget is what? Budget doesn't come out of the sky. It comes the day after. In the Indian history, we have the context where earlier economic budget and economic survey and budget used to come together, and now it is come one day after. It is not that the finance minister and the chief economic advisor meeting for the first time in that central hall. No, they interact. So we have got economic survey quintessentially telling the people what is the state of the economy. And you consider economy as a human being. A human being, if you take a human body, you may have a cancer over here. You may have a temperature over here. You may have an overgrowth over there. A body may have different problems. And this economic survey is the report, the diagnostics on it. Depending on the diagnostics of the problem, doctor gives prescription. The doctor's prescription is quintessentially the budget we are talking about. So for the prescriptions to go correct, the first thing is that you should have a proper understanding of what the economy is. If your understanding is wrong, if you say that everything is wonderful, then the prescription will be according to that. And even if, so for example, now the question is, when you are talking about an economy which is the 5th largest economy in the world, and we are going to be 3rd largest in the economy in the world, and we are taking very big pride in that. And what is the meaning of a 3rd largest economy in the world? Today, the 3rd largest economy may be Germany, $51,000 per capita income. And what is the international competitiveness? And when you're particularly talking about the knowledge, what is the position of that economy there? And where are we? We are talking about $2,000 plus per capita income. Now, in that kind of an economy, where do we stand in terms of, when you are talking in terms of your fiscal, we are talking about in terms of fiscal deficit. You are talking about 6.4% fiscal deficit in a country which is religiously following FRBM Act, on which Professor Mandel has written quite a lot. And what has happened in the agriculture sector, when you are talking about the poor, even if you think that you are the 5th largest and 3rd largest economy, 80 crore people are there, even there asking for Annapurna. And you are also having the fastest growing economy in the world and having the dubious distinction of housing the largest number of poor in the world. How do we reconcile both? So what I am trying to say that, as far as finance ministry is concerned, there are a lot of problems. There is the need for a mix of maybe fixing a surgery, maybe giving a course of antibiotic, maybe giving a couple of painkillers of high order like ibuprofen or something like that. But then it should not spoil your stomach. You have to give some antacid. You also may have to give some vitamins. What is the proportion in which this surgery, this antibiotic, these painkillers and antacid, etc., is combined in the budget? And when you are talking about 6.4% in the FRBM, and when you are asking state government, don't cross 3.5, that is the golden rule. There is no idea of when are you going to reach 3% in the central, because they told next year it will be 5.9, year after next nothing is given. And when you are talking about 10 lakh crore out of your total tax revenue of 26 lakh crore going as interest, what does it mean? When you are talking about state government, you should be disciplined. Is there a gap between practice and preaching? We cannot get a better person. When you are talking about agricultural allocation for food and public distribution system reduced by 30%, chemical and fertilizer ministry reduced by minus 12%, agriculture and farmer welfare etc. increased by hardly by 5%, when in a real terms it is negative, in a 5-6% inflation. So you cannot get a better person, because budget is an overarching thing dealing with the economy. You take Professor Sudipto, right from agriculture, on the terms of trade, you take, no, Sudipto is there. You talk about industry. I remember when I was reviewing a paper for it to Professor, when I sent to Dr. Raj, I was not very clear what he has written. When I was a faculty, he said, no, if Sudipto wrote, it should be correct. You cannot get a better tribute than a teacher. He is a student of Professor Raj in Delhi school. And he said, he must be correct. You read carefully. So, industry, you take public finance, you take sustainability, and the important positions that he has held. And above all, a wonderful teacher. And you cannot get a better person than Professor Mandel to deal with and educate you and answer your queries. And for this, inviting Professor Mandel, once again congratulate the the head of the department, Shinowaki, and their colleagues. And it is a great honor for me, sir, to be with you today. And I, with a lot of respect and lot of affection, I invite you for your lecture. Thank you.
Let me first of all convey my condolences to the family of Professor George Joseph. We have lost him only a few months ago. I never had the privilege of ever meeting him or getting to know him. It is my loss. But from everything that I have read about him and from what we have been hearing even this morning, he was really a wonderful human being. He was a person of many interests. He was certainly a teacher, but he was also interested in theater and in many social activities that we have already heard about. But I think above all, he was a very dedicated, devoted teacher and a very popular teacher who was always concerned with his students even after he has retired, from what I have learned today. And of course, he was a wonderful human being. So what a wonderful thing that the family has endowed this series of lectures in memory of Professor George Joseph. What better way to remember him over the years? However, it places me in a very challenging situation. It's an onerous responsibility because it is the first memorial lecture in his honor. It is also very onerous for me because this is the 100th year of this absolutely wonderful college. So it's a very, very special occasion, and I'm so privileged, Professor Varki, that you have invited me to be here for this event. Finally, I must say it is also onerous from what I have learned today. I don't really need to give this lecture at all, because whatever I'm going to say is going to be repeating what I think many of the students already know, because yesterday I heard that there was a competition and many of you present here made presentations, and 2 of you are going to be given awards. And of course, from the remarks of Father Kurian, Professor Varki, and Professor Joseph, you all already know much about the budget. So maybe what I'm going to be saying is going to be largely very repetitive. But please bear with me, because that is the job that I have been given. As I said, many of you are quite familiar with things like the budget, but there are others here who may not be so familiar. So for their benefit, let me just say that the budget of a country is in many ways very similar to the budget of a household or a family. You have some income, the government has revenue, and you spend it. Just like we spend money on our consumption or to buy property or invest in something in a family. And then there may be a gap between the two. If what you earn is more than what you spend, then you have a surplus which you save. If you spend more than what you earn, you have a deficit for which, of course, you have to borrow money. Exactly the same thing goes on with the annual budgets of the central government. The only difference is whether you are running a budget surplus or you have a deficit. Is the deficit being increased or is it being decreased? Has a nationwide effect. It impacts what is going to happen to the economy in terms of growth and inflation and so on. You have to very finely calibrate this. So it's a very intricate exercise. In that sense, it is a little different. So there are 3 parts, as I said, to a budget as to a household. There is the difference between revenue and expenditure, which is the fiscal stance. There's, of course, the revenue side, taxation and so on, and then there's the expenditure side. So I'm going to speak to you in these 3 parts, starting with the fiscal stance of the government, the central government, as we have seen in this budget. But before that, it is important for me to specify the background against which we are making this budget, because whether the fiscal stance is appropriate or inappropriate depends on the context, the conditions in which you are making this budget. This particular budget has been made under very, very challenging conditions. As all of you know, the ongoing Ukraine war created global supply disruptions, especially for things like oil and fertilizer and so on. Commodity prices became very unstable. Also, as a result, many countries, especially the advanced countries, are expected to go into recession by the second half of this year. In addition to that, because of the supply disruption, inflation became, and the pump priming that had been done earlier in the advanced countries, especially the United States, inflation became very high. The first time I have seen in my lifetime that inflation in countries like the US was higher than inflation in our own country. So of course they went into a very, very strong contractionary program, trying to raise interest rates so that people would borrow and spend less and so on. But when that goes up, it also has an effect on our country. So this global situation had two types of effects. One was the risk of recession, which is going to adversely affect our demand for exports, which will have an adverse effect on the economy as a whole. But also, because of rising interest rates, there's been a tendency of what we call portfolio money, capital that is fungible, flowing out of all emerging markets, including India. So that again has an adverse effect on us. So this is the very challenging context in which this budget has been made, and these exacerbate the kind of problems we have internally in our country. It has been said that India is in a very sweet spot, it has a very high growth rate, etc., but we do have major challenges of our own. First of all, on the question of growth, we are all, not all, but a lot of people are celebrating the fact that we are ending this year with something like 7% growth. It was even higher last year. What is often not recognized is that all this is a very strong base effect of the big dip in production that we had because of the pandemic. If this is your normal level and you suddenly go down and you just come back to that normal level, your growth rate will appear to be very high. And that's really what has happened during the past 2 years, and we are now more or less back to, we've just exceeded the level where we were before the pandemic in fiscal 2019-20. But going forward, it is not very clear where we are going to go. I have to say, economic survey was referred to earlier. It has been reasonably realistic. Of course, it being a government document, they have to put their best foot forward. But the chief economic advisor has at least acknowledged that there are challenges and the growth rate could be going down to decline to about 6%. Our own forecast, me and my collaborators, we forecast that in the year that is going to start on the 1st of April, growth would be only about 5.2%. So, trying to restore growth and get onto a high growth path because, as I think Father Kurian mentioned in his opening remarks, we are a huge country with the largest population, a very large young population, often talked about as the demographic dividend when they get into the workforce, provided they have work. If they don't have work, this demographic dividend becomes a democratic curse. So maintaining a high rate of growth is a very big challenge for us, and of course generating employment along with that. So that remains a key priority. Inflation has also been very elevated in our country in the last year or so. It has now peaked, it has started coming down a little bit, but for over a year it has been well above what the Reserve Bank considered its tolerance band. It has a mandate to maintain inflation at around 4% with a +2 to -2% tolerance band. We've been above that tolerance band throughout the past year. So inflation has also been a problem. It is still elevated. However, it has peaked. It is a little moderated in the last 3 months. Finally, we have, I'm talking about the macroeconomic situation, we have a current account deficit. That is the deficit between balance of payments is what we earn and what we spend in exports and other things, and earn and spend on imports and so on. That gap, comfort level is about 2%. Of course, the developing country has to have capital from abroad. So deficit on the current account means that you're getting about 2% of a GDP as capital inflows, which is a good thing. But if it becomes too large, then you are at risk of suddenly the foreign lenders getting into what is called a sudden stop, saying this country is not viable, we are not going to lend it money. And then you go into a very steep balance of payments crisis. We've been there in the past, but other countries like Argentina, Mexico, and so on have been in much worse situations than us. So keeping an eye on the current account deficit, making sure that it doesn't become too large is very important. At the moment, it is too large for us. 2% of GDP is a comfort level. Now it is around 3%. So that is again a third aspect that we have to keep in mind. So growth rate, inflation rate, current account deficit. These are the 3 parameters of a broad macroeconomic framework in which this budget has to be seen. As I've said, inflation has already peaked. It started to moderate. But more important than that, managing inflation is really the responsibility of the central bank, of the Reserve Bank of India, not of the government, of the union government or the finance ministry. Controlling inflation is single mandate of the central bank. And anyway, as I said, Maurice, so that seems to be less of a priority. On the current account deficit side, though it is too large for our comfort, as I said, the government has adopted a policy of allowing the exchange rate to keep adjusting so that if your exchange rate depreciates, your exports become cheaper, your imports become more expensive, so you have what is called an expenditure switch, higher exports, less imports, and gradually your balance of payment will adjust. So that's the strategy that has been adopted as far as that is concerned, with some qualifications, but I'll leave that aside. So the main focus then needs to be on growth. So we needed a budget which would focus on growth. However, it is also important to remember from a long-term growth perspective that if your public debt becomes too high, what is called a debt GDP ratio is very high, then you have a large interest burden to be paid. In fact, right now, something like a quarter of our budget is spent on just meeting the interest on past debt. Now, apart from, and that of course crowds out other desirable expenditure like on education, health, infrastructure, welfare spending, what have you. So, in addition to that, a large amount of borrowing again puts pressure on financial markets because the government is the biggest borrower by far in our country and pushes up interest rates as has happened in the West, which means that your private investment cycle does not get activated because when costs of money goes up, investors balk at borrowing to invest in new capital formation and so on. So our private investment cycle is just beginning to revive, and it is very important that at this stage it not get disrupted again. From these points of view, I think the need for fiscal consolidation is important, meaning that you don't have a very large deficit or a rapidly growing deficit. So what this year's budget needed to do is find a balance between these two. Push growth, meaning pump prime demand, high expenditure, large deficit and so on to push growth, but on the other hand maintain a control on the deficit so that you don't build up a high debt GDP ratio which would in the medium to long term adversely affect that same growth that you're interested in. So balancing between this short-term effect on growth and the long-term effect via large deficits and large public debt was really the key challenge that this budget had to address, in my view. Can we have table 1, please? Yeah. Thank you. So, as I said, the focus needed to be on navigating a way between, growth and maintaining a fiscal consolidation path, but at a time when growth is yet unstable and needs to be regularized. And many, including I myself, have been saying that what you needed to do is, because our deficit become very large because of the pandemic, and you had to have large, pump priming of demand and so on. And it's been moderated last year, and we have suggested that it be brought down by just 0.5% of GDP, not more than that, not to front load the compression and reduction of the fiscal deficit. And I think that has broadly been done. If you see the row 9 over there, which is the fiscal deficit, you will see that as a percentage of GDP, which are those figures in parentheses over there, it had gone up to, it had been gone up much higher, but it was brought down to about 6.4% last year, the revised estimates that we've just seen in the present budget, which was the target. And for this year, they have budgeted 5.9%, which means a 0.5% reduction in the fiscal deficit. So from my perspective, that is an appropriate stance that the government has taken. Now let me move on to, as I said, I'll talk in 3 parts. I've talked about the fiscal stance. Now I want to talk about the tax, and then I'll come to expenditure. May I have table 2, please? Thank you. As you will see from there, row 2, gross tax revenue, that is of center plus states, that is the total tax revenue which the center collects and then the states get their share, that has been projected at 10.4%. Now, out of that, when you take away the state share, you get what is the center's share, that is net to center, which is there in row number 3, and that is at 11.7%. So a little more than the total recovery of revenues. But this is not so much because of tax revenues, but because of non-tax revenues, which I will come to in a minute. So broadly, this is assuming that tax revenue will grow at par with the rate of growth of the economy. Because as I said, the assumption for GDP that the budget has assumed is 10.5%, nominal terms. How much of that is the inflation and how much of that will be real growth is a separate question. The budget does not, leaves it open, never specifies. But 10.5% is a nominal growth rate. And if you're assuming that your tax revenue will also grow at roughly the same rate, that's what we call unit buoyancies, balanced growth of tax revenue and GDP. And that indeed has been the pattern that we have seen in the past, more or less unit buoyancy. It moves up and down from year to year, but that's the sort of average trend. So this again seems to me to be an appropriate stance. Looking at direct taxes, again, that is assumed to go up by 10.5%. Similarly, the non-indirect taxes side, that is also to go up by about 10.4%. And you can see those over there. Direct taxes row number 4, indirect taxes row number 5, and so on. And then under that, you have the GST data. What is high over here, however, is the non-tax revenue, as I mentioned, that has been assumed that will grow at a fairly high rate of 14.5% or 15.2%. So that is what is accounting for the fact, as I mentioned, that revenue growth is projected to grow slightly higher than the rate of growth of GDP. Now, that's, I'm just giving the broad numbers overall. On the qualitative side, there have been a number of important changes. As you know, the number of slabs have been reduced. Ideally, you should have very few slabs, so the reduction slabs is again a welcome decision. There has been an increase in the what is called the exemption limit a little bit. Also, quite importantly, there has been the rebate has been raised quite substantially. If you move to what is called the new tax regime, the new tax regime basically is one where many of the exemptions and so on get removed. So there has been these adjustments, and it has been said that this is, it's a middle class budget. It's to help the middle class because you have an election 1 year down the road, and it's to make it popular with the middle class and so on. But the fact is that what we call the middle class, people who actually are income tax paying people in this country, is really just about 5% of very rich people. There's nothing in the middle. And so and there's a small minority of the electorate that votes. So I don't think that this really is, it's a vote getter. Yes, it may get some votes from the middle class, but I don't think that was the real motivation. I think the real motivation is to nudge taxpayers from the old system to the new system. Right now you can do both. You can pay tax as per the old regime or according to the new tax regime. And obviously the central government is trying to gradually move away from the old to the new and is providing some incentives for that. The only other remark I want to make regarding, on the qualitative side regarding taxes, is on indirect taxes relating to customs duties. I'm not going to comment at all on the main indirect tax, which is GST, because that is decided not by the budget, that's decided by the GST Council, which includes the Central Finance Minister and the finance ministers of all the states. Kerala, like other states, have an input into that. I'm sure his institute, GIFT, is doing a lot of the homework for that from the Kerala side. So that is not really a central government mandate and budget mandate. I'm leaving it aside. But what I do want to talk about is customs duties. Our customs duties are among the highest in the world. And high customs duties, which of course are done because producers want to be protected, but in fact that biases the whole tax regime against exporters. Because if you can produce in a inside protected walls within your country, why would you want to export and compete with the rest of the world? But so this is a very adverse movement that has happened in the past 3-4 budgets, and it needed to be brought down, it needed to be rationalized. The other peculiar thing they would do in this ad hoc, tampering with indirect tax rates, custom duty rates, is that in some cases your tax rate on the input is higher than on the final product. And this inversion, again, is it's a very crazy kind of situation. What I'm happy to say is that this year, some of that has been sorted out, has been rationalized, but the average tax rates have not, that tariff customs have not been brought down. We remain very high. And if we have to compete with, say, a country like Vietnam or Bangladesh, who, by the way, have left us behind now, in terms of their share of world trade, though they were far behind us earlier, they don't follow these policies. They use the exchange rate and low tariff rates and so on in order to be competitive in the global markets, have their exports growing, which in turn drives the growth of the economy. So there's a long way to go as far as that is concerned. Table 3, please. Let me now move to the expenditure side of the budget. I think, as has already been mentioned, there has been a big thrust in the capital spending of this budget. Actually, can I go back to table 1 first? I want to show something there. Yeah, if you look at that, under revenue expenditure, the number is missing. Should have been 8. That capital, just below that is capital expenditure. Yes, you will see that, and you come to the last column, you see that a huge hike of 37.4%. This is on top of a 23% increase last year and a 39% increase the year before that, and so on. This government, the central government, and this was the same thing, by the way, with the BJP government under Prime Minister Vajpayee, is very focused on spending, on infrastructure, building roads and ports and so forth. And you see that a massive push has been given to infrastructure. So I suspect from the central government's perspective that you're killing two birds with one stone. On the one hand, you're building up an infrastructure, and that is quite visible. You go, whether you're driving on roads today, all of this, by the way, had started during Vajpayee's time. The golden quadrilangle and the railway investment, and now you also see on top of that airports and ports and so forth. So that is the known thrust of this government. It has continued on that path. And I think that is a welcome development. However, if you look at it, you see capital expenditure has gone up by 37.4%, but if you look at revenue expenditure, which is row number 7, it has hardly changed at all. It is just 1.2% growth, which means in real terms there's a decline, because meanwhile your prices are going up by 4, 5, 6%. So this compression has happened, and that is mainly because if you look at the revenue expenditure, that's what it's saying, 1.2%. As a result, your total expenditure has not gone up that much really. It has, you look at total expenditure, which is row 6, it has grown only by 7.5%. So how do you get 7.5% of the total growing at that rate when your capital expenditure is growing at close to 40%? It's by cutting revenue expenditure. And we will come to that more detail when I go back to the expenditures side. Can we move back to table 3 now? 3A, sorry. Yeah, if you look at this, as I was saying, interest payments, that is 2.1, eat up about a quarter of your total expenditure. So there's that much less left for you to spend on other desirable expenditure. The other interesting thing you find, if you look at row 2.2, that is defense services, that share has come down now of total expenditure, central expenditure, to 9.6%. And it used to be 11.9%. You do the math, that's a 20% reduction in just a few years. Now that's a huge reduction in the share of defense, especially in an environment where our external environment, as you know, with our hostile neighbors, has been very challenging. So these are two issues of concern on specifics, but really the broad point is that if you look at now, you come to economic service under that, food storage and warehousing. That is where the food subsidy is shown. That has in fact been cut very severely. If you look at rural development, which includes, it was mentioned earlier, the Rural Employment Program Manrega, again it has been cut severely. Agriculture and allied activities, again a severe cut. Why? Because there's this income support given to farmers, now called the PM Kisan Samman program. That has also been not cut as severely, but cut back. So I think, as was mentioned earlier, this huge increase in capital expenditure has really come at the cost of what I would call welfare spending. I'm not referring much to expenditure on education, health, because really those are state subjects, and the main spending really is done on those by the state governments. Of course, the central government has been gradually encroaching in the space of what is really the state subject under the 7th schedule of the Constitution through what are known as, these shared program between the center and the states. And increasingly the share of the spending by the states has been going up and so on. So I'm not going into education, health, but the main concerns are these, that the huge increase in capital spending has come at the cost of a cutback in welfare spending, especially on the rural employment program and on food subsidies and so on. So, so that broadly is my take on this budget. First of all, the budget has been prepared under very challenging circumstances, as I said, and it needed to carefully balance between pushing growth, which has been faltering, and maintaining the fiscal consolidation path. I think that balance has been reasonable, in the sense it's reduced the fiscal deficit target by just 0.5% of GDP, on a path where in 25-26 it has committed to bring it down to 4.5%, and that's not. I think that's a fairly balanced kind of approach. The other big thing, I said, revenue projections are a buoyancy of one that has been assumed, growing at the same rate as GDP is again quite reasonable. What is welcome is the big boost in capital spending, but what is most unwelcome, which ruins this otherwise good story, is that you've done all this entirely at the cost of really the poorest people in the country, and that I find is very, very unfortunate. So let me stop on that note. Thank you.
Heads of the department, faculty members, family members of George Joseph Sir, alumni, esteemed colleagues, and dear students. You all will agree with me that today's Professor George Joseph Memorial Union Budget Analysis has been thought-provoking. It helped us to deep dive into the different dimensions, namely the growth rate, the inflation rate, and also current account deficits, that give us a greater clarity about the Union Budget 2023-24. Let me pass to the pleasant task of giving vote of thanks to all. The president of this meeting is our principal, Reverend Father Rajiv Kurian. In his absence also, let me give him our great gratitude to Father for his guidance and support throughout the planning and execution of this program. Thank you, Father. I want to express our sincere gratitude to our keynote speaker, Professor Sudipto Mundal, for delivering a thought-provoking and highly engaging budget discussion. With his insights and knowledge, he has given us a realistic analysis of the Union Budget 2023-24. Thank you very much, sir. Let me express our deep gratitude to the chair of this budget analysis, Professor K.J. Joseph, a true academician cum visionary, who is chairing this session and providing his valuable insights about the importance of interactive spaces in the academic institutions and also a critical evaluation of the budget. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us. Dr. P.C. Anyankun, former principal of St. Aloysius College, Edatwa, and our distinguished alumnus, shared his profound memories about Professor George Joseph. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us today. Thank you. We truly appreciate and value the presence of our former heads of the department, M.S. James sir, T.K. Thomas sir, Philip sir, and Joseph Kurian sir. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us today and for your valuable guidance and support. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our department head, Dr. Shinu Vaki, who put much effort into bringing eminent economists to our midst, and his vision and commitment have made this event possible. Sincere gratitude to you, dear Shinu. We thankfully acknowledge Professor George Joseph Sir's family members' respect and love towards George Sir by instituting an endowment fund to cherish the fond memories of Sir. Sir, so lovely to be with us today, and your involvement have helped us making this program a truly memorable one. Thank you very much, dear family members. Thanks to Merchant Association and Deepika newspaper for their media presence. And also thank you, dear esteemed colleagues, especially Professor Johnson K. Joyce and Dr. Gerald Tom for their tireless efforts in putting this conference together. Thank you all. Congratulations and thanks to the first Professor George Thomas Paper Presentation Competition winners, G. Sabu and Lishan Abraham. Thank you very much. I think students have already taken Joseph Sir's insights that there must be more interactive in this kind of sessions, and they participated in a very interactive manner and in a very dynamic manner. Thanks, dear students, for your patient listening and cooperation. Our sincere gratitude to the students from other institutions and our neighbor and other institutions and faculty members. Thank you, dear students and teachers. Once again, I thank you all for your presence and support. I hope you have enjoyed the program and will continue to be the part of the future events of the program. Thank you.